the best K-pop album covers and why I think they're effective. Square Up by Blackpink, an unpopular opinion to include on a list of best album covers, I'm sure, but I really like this one. I think the Square Up concept is so unintentionally remarkable that I end up loving the album cover conceptually. It's literally a square up, technically a cube, but a physical representation of the 4 members of Blackpink transitioning musically from the 2-dimensional squares of the first 2 EPs, Square 1 and Square 2, and now they enter the 3rd dimension for their first EP album, Square Up. I really appreciate it, and in retrospect, that was the case here. Did changed everything for Blackpink and K-pop in many ways. Simple but effective. Retrofuturism by Triple H. We're just gonna quickly go over this. I love the album cover so much. Whoever the concept director was at Cube who cultivated this 90s aesthetic for the whole release, even the stage performances. This was 2018, the dinosaur times at this point, and yet they still kind of captured the essence of what would become Gen Z's distorted fascination with Y2K influenced by the 90s. They knew something we didn't. The cover really crystallizes that enticing sense of distorted nostalgia into a single frame. The neon gradients and saturated tones. It's an off window into the late 90s refracted through a modern lens, which is why it feels familiar but maybe uncanny to some, maybe to the people who actually lived through the 90s. The easy, digitized, and bold fonts and clashing colors mimic the maximalism of the era, and the group styling leans into an almost, I would say, campy glamour that borders on parody but never quite tips over. It's a perfect visual look at the album's sonic palette, retro synths warped into hyper-contemporary production, also often disco grooves whittled down by modern edges. The artwork announces the concept, simple as it is. It blurs past and present into a seamless but chaotic continuum, embodying the exact tension between nostalgia and futurism that Triple H explored in sound. It's retro futurism, right? So excellent. Number 8, New Jeans, the debut album by New Jeans. This bunny was tired, so oversaturated by the time we got to OMG because they kept recoloring it for subsequent releases. I think the remix album places us at 5 different color versions, but the original debut album cover is still so remarkable to me. It is deceptively simple, yet it carries an almost, I would say, mythic weight in how it introduces the group's ethos. At the center of it all is a single bunny, a figure that feels playful and very cryptic. Its exact meaning is always left unsaid. That ambiguity is intentional, mirroring the way New Jeans themselves entered the industry. Suddenly, with no grand explanation, only with an aesthetic that was so fully formed and realized that it felt inevitable. The bunny becomes a textural emblem, rendered with a tactile softness that speaks to New Jeans' balance of the intuitive and the subversive. Its design hints at nostalgia and comfort while also feeling oddly futuristic in its aesthetic awareness. I feel like I'm getting too pretentious with this already, but who cares at this point? It's all an anchor for the group's layered identity. Just like the album's music, the cover kind of invites you in without spelling everything out, letting the mystery itself become part of the allure. In this way, New Jeans, as a debut album, establishes a cultural symbol, one that lingers in its understated strangeness and really sets the tone for their disruptive presence in K-pop musically from a musical perspective, right? The Village of Perception, Chapter 1. I like all of Billy's album covers, and there are others that are certainly more visually complex than this one, but this is by far my favorite. Not their flashiest visual work, but it's arguably their most effective in my opinion. It looks like something you'd stumble across in a middle school library, like a vintage paperback mystery novel, very worn over the years, cryptically inviting you to open its pages. And that really is what Billy was doing with their debut, opening the book on a story that felt so much bigger than the group itself. The cover's design channels a retro sensibility, with muted tones and an almost analog texture that makes it feel like a relic from the 90s, or maybe the 80s. Yeah, I would say the 80s, perfectly suited to the mystery of Billy Love's disappearance. There's something so great about how ordinary it looks at first glance, yet the closer you study it, the more it feels like a genuine puzzle or mystery. The album cover works as a clue that the music within will be just as layered and strange. Out of all of their album covers so far, this one stands out because it represents the music as much as the lore, really outlining Billy's expertise for fusing conceptual world building with great senses of atmosphere. Odd by Shiny. I think we can start to see a through line here with all of the album covers discussed so far. I love simplistic yet still conceptual album covers that convey meaning and intention behind the music. Odd is once again incredibly simplistic. A body submerged in a pool. Whoever it is, this person is caught in mid-motion, the water rippling in distorted fragments above them. This imagery works so well as a visual translation of the album's thematic weight, the sensation of sinking underwater, of surrendering to the pressure, right? It mirrors this album's preoccupation with fixation and desire, feelings that are so consuming that they overwhelm the senses. The opening track of this album, Odd Eye, sets the tone immediately. The lyrics and music trace the dizzying spell of falling in a love that is so intoxicating that it bends perception itself. The cover picks up that same narrative thread. To be underwater is to be suspended in a different reality where humans are not supposed to be for very long, right? Where so many senses are warped or prohibited. It's beautiful, but also suffocating, a state where you aren't fully in control. That tension between the allure and danger of water runs through the album's DNA. SHINee, at this point in their career, were already masters of reinvention, but here they leaned into something so much more abstract after a bit of a long break. Odd is a project that communicates through a sensation, the feeling of being overcome and slightly undone by someone else. The album cover doesn't tell a literal story in that sense, it distills a mood, giving shape to the more psychological undercurrent of the album's music. Yeah, so excellent. Odd's cover locks that sensation into a single frame, a picture of genuine surrender to something larger than the self. Electric Shock, FX. After all these years, I still don't know what this album cover makes me feel, but I've arrived to the conclusion that maybe that's the point. It's one of those visuals that really lodges itself into your memory without ever offering an explanation, which in many ways makes it the perfect kind of distillation of K-pop's eccentric nature, and just of FX themselves, right? At first glance, the cover feels so jarringly theatrical, almost horror movie inspired. There's an unsettling blankness to it, right? Like the image itself is buzzing with some kind of static, indicative of the album being named Electric Shock, right? Yet what's kind of fascinating is that the album doesn't sonically lean into this horror film or quirky suggestion at all. Electric Shock as a project is playful, bright, and experimental in its hyper-electro-pop production. It's really only this chaotic conceptually, and that disconnect is kind of what makes it so significant to me. It doesn't function as a literal translation of the music. Instead, its significance to me kind of works as a parallel artifact of K-pop's origins, an image with its own self-contained energy. The album cover and the album itself don't mirror each other as much as they kind of orbit each other, sharing the same title but expressing it in entirely different ways. That slipping between image and sound is what makes Electric Shock feel representative of K-pop, where concept often thrives in the dissonance between what you see and what you hear. FX were always at their best when walking that line between the absurd and the innovative, when aesthetics and music didn't quite line up but somehow still amplified each other. I think this was intentional, simply due to how little concept work with depth was regarded in K-pop during this time, especially for girl groups. Electric Shock's cover may not fit the songs in a traditional sense, but it builds an aura around the release. A very weird atmosphere that makes the project feel larger than the sum of its parts. This is literally the ethos of FX as a group, but also a reference to the function itself. Sometimes it's all about leaving you unsettled and maybe even a little confused. Twice Coaster Lane 1 by Twice. This is one of my all-time favorite K-pop albums from my all-time favorite K-pop group, so I have a bit of a bias in that way, but I chose this because it's very representative of Twice's leading concept and how that became a convention of the K-pop genre due to their success. I think I've said this for every entry here, but once again, the cover of Twice Coaster Lane 1 thrives in its simplicity. At first glance, it's literally just the 9 members sprawled out casually on a makeshift field, but that snapshot in time kind of quality is what captures the essence of early Twice so well. It's approachable, joyful, whimsical at times, and grounded in a kind of unpolished sincerity that resonated so deeply with fans. The playful graphic design feels scrapbooked, a candid memory that is pasted into a diary. That sense of immediacy in the album cover mirrors the music inside. We're presented with songs that really go out of their way to celebrate fleeting feelings and the unintentional and unknowing joy of youth. The album cover becomes a visual thesis statement for Twice's concept at the time, pop that feels so personal and unguarded, but yet by the end so welcoming. It became an aesthetic of its own that defined their identity, but also, in a lot of ways, helped cement a new convention for K-pop itself in the third generation. Very, very excellent. The Red by Red Velvet. This is one of those album covers that grows so much in significance the more you sit with it, especially when you look back, knowing just how seriously the group would come to embody their dual red and velvet concept. As their first full-length album, it set a precedent for the kind of high art, high concept execution Red Velvet would become known for. The cover itself is, again, deceptively simple. Literally just the members in bright, slightly off-kilter outfits, their expressions caught between deadpan seriousness and a side-eyeing of absurdity or mischief in the case of Seulgi. It's playful, but in a way that never gives itself up to parody. The silliness is presented with a remarkable dignity. That is the red side of Red Velvet's concept. It's the dignity of how they're posed for this album cover, fully in on the bit and willing to execute it and honor it. That balance is the heart of Red Velvet's identity, committing fully to any concept, no matter how crazy or silly, and importantly, using exaggeration as a vehicle for real emotional resonance. I just talked about this in my video about Idol's Queen card, but this is the essence of K-pop to me in a lot of ways, taking the surreal and the ridiculous, presenting it with striking sincerity, and transforming it into something truly unforgettable. This album cover mirrors the music and concept perfectly, bold, strange, and unafraid to blur the line between camp and seriousness. It subtly encapsulates Red Velvet's uniqueness in the industry, that they would always lean into the theatrical and make that feel necessary to telling their story. Yeah, there's a lot of Red Velvet album covers to choose from for a list like this. Obviously, they are the best of the best when it comes to concept work, but The Red has always stood out to me as special. A decade into their career now, it's the fact that the first full album showcasing their concept is visualized by the members themselves, right? You Never Walk Alone, BTS. Yeah. Similar to The Red, another one of those album covers where the resonance has only deepened with time, becoming really mythological in the group's larger story. The bus stop set against an open horizon at Jumanji Beats please, has transformed into a pilgrimage site for K-pop fans, a literal landmark of the cultural footprint BTS has carved into the world. I feel like I'm gonna cry about this. I love this album so much. But even beyond its real-world connections, the cover captures something so elemental about the album's soundscape and themes. This quiet spaciousness, a longing tempered with a small flicker of hope, and the symbolism of the bus stop itself, the sense that you are always on the cusp of departure or arrival, never fully one or the other. The emptiness of the seats as well is so striking. It's an image that at one time is lonely, but also full of potential or possibility, embodying the tension at the heart of this album. You Never Walk Alone is an album about youth in full phase, about pain that is shared and remedied by companionship, and the idea that even in moments of solitude or loneliness, you are tethered to something greater than yourself. The stillness of this album cover mirrors the music's tone, atmospheric, emotional, vast, built around a sense of pure longing. That empty beach becomes a place for us, the listeners, to sit alongside BTS, to fill the absence or the quietness with our own stories. In retrospect, I think why this album cover stands out to me the most is that it feels like one of the purest distillations of BTS's ethos. Again, I feel like I'm saying this for every single album, but the simplicity is the power. It translates the narrative of the album, the reconciliation of isolation and solidarity, into a single universal image and theme. Plus Plus by Luna. Similar to the last two songs, the significance, the cultural weight of the album cover just increases exponentially over time. The 12 members stand neatly arranged on a diving platform, framed by the trees and the sky, a kind of late summer scene that seems ordinary on the surface, but in hindsight, knowing what would come later, instead of this cover feeling like the beginning of something, it reads like a fleeting moment that is frozen in time. The pool below them is empty. You don't see that in the photograph, but the Hi music video makes it clear, though you can kind of infer through the chipped paint that this pool hasn't been used or tended to in quite a while. The members stand on a platform built for diving into something vast, but there is nothing there to catch them. It becomes a metaphor that only grows sharper with time and hindsight, that there was nothing to catch them. This sense of soaring toward a dream with no safety net, no water is waiting for them below. It's a picture of something once so full of promise, and yet that's exactly what gives the cover a haunting staying power to this day. For a brief moment, they were all there together, framed against the sky, standing on the edge of something so remarkable. The album cover preserves that moment like a time capsule. It's the calm before the leap, before the cracks in the foundation of the diving platform and the emptiness of the pool meant something. That emptiness below them kind of amplifies the magic. It reminds me, or I guess leads me to consider, that what was extraordinary about Luna was simply the fact that they existed together at all, even if only for a brief and frankly impossible moment in time. But yeah, these are 10 of my favorite K-pop album covers. I do have a lot more. I might make another video like this sometime soon, but let me know what you think about this. What are your favorite album covers? How are they effective to you? And things like that. Yes, thank you so much for watching this. If you did, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.